Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic, let's do it. Have you ever met anyone who, in your eyes, is truly evil? If so, what's the story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I worked briefly with a psychologist whose clients were ex-offenders. Their therapy was mandatory. Most almost seemed like normal guys, but a little off. But one would give me the chills just entering the room. I could feel him before I could see him. He made me so uncomfortable. There was the lobby and the reception area where I sat. My area was behind a security door that had to be buzzed open, and there was one of those partitions with a few slots for paperwork, etc. But the client couldn't access me unless I buzzed them in. This guy would sit across the lobby, the chair farthest from my area, and just stare at me, rubbing his palms on his knees. He never said more than a few words to me. After a few months of this, I told my boss that I couldn't stand it anymore. I started feeling really paranoid and afraid of walking to my car or being followed or something. And when I said that, my boss became very serious and asked me if I had seen the client outside of the office, anywhere at all. Even just for a second. It turns out that client had been stalking and awing women since the 80s, and I was his type. My uncle, father's brother, I'm adopted, and during my whole childhood my mother tried shielding me from this man by keeping me away, but was kind enough to not speak too ill of him. She told me he loved us, but is just a closed-off person. When growing up, I learned of how twisted he was. Once my grandmother died, he tried taking over my dad's part of the inheritance. He worked overtime for my father to divorce my mom, and once she passed away, he tried, along with his wife, to force my dad into changing his will to suit himself. Once my dad got ill and I had to hospitalize him, he made a false complaint against me, saying I abused my elderly, helpless father into starvation. All because I wasn't bloody and a person of color. I was very close to spending years in prison for pure pettiness. And to top things off, he spread a rumor during my dad's funeral about me abducting my dad and keeping them apart. Yeah, that's him. My cousin's girlfriend. They dated for 5 years. He treated her like a queen. He gave her everything he could and worked 2 jobs, good paying ones too. He brought home 6 figures between the 2 jobs so that she could stay home and have a nice house and nice clothes and just generally an easy life with nice stuff. His life was dedicated to making her happy, and the thanks he got? She went out of her way to constantly belittle him and make sure he knew he was worthless in her eyes, constantly, every effing day. We kept telling him to break up with her, but he was convinced he couldn't do better and that he'd be forever alone if he lost her. Yeah, that was her doing too. She had him convinced she was doing him a favor just by existing in his life, no matter how poorly she treated him. It never stopped. Right up to the day he took her "I wish you were dead" seriously and made it so. Last time I saw her, she was laughing about it. I'm not a violent person, but in that moment, I was sorely tempted to wreck her pretty face and make it match her ugly soul. The wife of my old boss. She'd come into work late, angry, and drunk, parking her Mercedes across 2 spaces and demand everyone drop everything to help her fix some trivial issue. If anyone had anything more pressing to get on with, she'd fly off the handle screaming about how it's her effing company. Then my boss died, and she was left in charge. She buried her head in the sand and would scream and cry about how she was going to kill herself when anyone asked her to do anything important, like sign bank paperwork or bring someone in to help. She didn't let any of his family attend the funeral and went into detail in the eulogy about how they got together through an affair and how people getting hurt was necessary. Then, when someone at the company who'd been there by the boss's side since the beginning was diagnosed with lung cancer, She said, and I quote, "I wish he'd hurry up and die so I don't have to give him any more sick pay." Then, the business went under, and we all got made redundant via email. No idea what happened to her. She lived by herself and had no other contact with anyone. The burned village, and she burned every single bridge she had, even her neighbors. I don't believe in karma in the spiritual sense, but I definitely feel like she's living her punishment for being so vile. My sister, she's stolen hundreds, if not thousands, of pain pills from my grandmother and my mom, hundreds of dollars from everyone she knows, and several things from numerous stores like Walmart or Dollar General. She's a habitual lying sociopath who cares about no one but herself. If she was thirsty, she'd sell both of her kids for a drink. I could say more, but I'm tired, and trying to remember every single bad thing she did would take me at least an hour, if not longer. I try to see the good in people. When I hear of people murdering and stealing and everything else, I try to see it from their point of view. I genuinely wish we could all do and be better people. If she dropped dead right now, I would absolutely not shed a single tear. I wouldn't be happy she's gone, but at the same time, the world is a better place if she wasn't in it. Criminal defense lawyer here. I have only met one truly evil person out of thousands of what society would consider incredibly dangerous individuals. 95% of my clients are behind bars. He is the only client I refuse to be in a room alone with. When I first met him, it was behind glass at a correctional center for an interview. I was very grateful for that glass. He was cold, calculating, manipulative, charming. I'll never forget his dead, yet somehow playful eyes. I was a mouse to him, to be fair. He viewed everyone as his plaything and his lawyer. I was no exception. I think 99.9% of all my clients could be rehabilitated and released to live safely in the community. Not him. Extreme narcissist. The guy sent emails to me and my boss about my poor work performance while I was sitting at my dying mother's hospital bed. When I returned from that trip later, he was literally standing in my office with a tape measure. Apparently, he took my absence as an opportunity to take my office permanently. I had a higher job title than this guy to top it all off. And no, he didn't get the office. You think you work in a company that they claim are a meritocracy, and then some nepotism and who-you-know-ism takes over and kind of ruins it all. It's a shame. Used to manage a Staples copy center. We had an idiot GM that lied their way into the position, and it showed. Eventually, the regional manager decided we needed to get rid of her and put a new GM in place. He decided to move one of his other GMs from another store to ours. My store was one of the highest profit stores in the company because our commercial rent was locked very close to the original rent from when the building was built. We're talking about needing to be open for 2 days to cover the bill for the whole month. The new manager came in and decided he wanted a fresh start and more profit, and launched an internal investigation claiming widespread employee theft. He had friends in loss prevention and convinced them to find anything they could on everyone in the store. Everyone save the 2 assistant managers were fired and blacklisted from ever being employed by Staples again. I would later find out that the guy was a former cop who had been fired for unethical conduct. I didn't just find out about this passively. One of his former officers, that was a member at my MMA gym, made a point of telling me about it and said, "Stay away from him. You can't trust anything he says or does." I ended up making it my personal campaign to get him removed from the company. He was finally removed, but I'm still blacklisted. Yes, the person was my father. Without writing a novel, he was physically abusive toward myself and abusive and emotionally abusive toward my mother and sisters. One of my sisters is also my niece as a result of his grotesque belief about women and his obsession to have a son. There are arguments that could be made that there are worse people in the world, but in my mind, there is no such thing as anything worse than what my father was, a monster. Edit. I can't believe that all of the posts that I've made over the years, this is the one that blows up. I mean, it's weird as F to me that my trauma is somehow entertainment to others, but I did want to answer the question honestly. Just to answer a few questions quickly and clearly, so I don't have to repeat myself too many times, both my parents have passed away, along with 6 of my 9 sisters. My sister or niece is one of the ones who has passed away. My extended family treats me very well, and I have a very close relationship with my extended family. But my remaining 3 sisters, who are still in the United States, refuse to speak to me. My family disowned me when I was 14 because I was gay. I'm now 37, so in all honesty, no time lost. I don't think I've ever had a post that hit 500 upvotes, so I'm a little bit not sure how to respond correctly. My half-brother. I have 3 siblings who are all half-siblings, but I just call the others my brother and sister. I try to distance myself from him as much as possible. He's like 90% disowned by the family because my sister and I have made it clear we will not be attending anything he is at. He's a racist, misogynistic, drug-addicted thief that steals, abuses his wife and kids, assaults people, and is a generally shit person. He stole a car with a kid in it once. He lived with his aunt to help her since she was bedbound, but was just stealing money from her and letting her rot in bed. He's done meth, heroin, and cocaine, and was so addicted to alcohol, he injected it before. My mom keeps giving him second chances and money, and it's so infuriating. Yes, Ms. Makos, a teacher at St. Cyril Elementary School in Pittsburgh in the 80s and 90s, was a truly evil person. When I was in her class, she behaved super sweetly to this poor boy who had just had to repeat 3rd grade and was understandably awkward when joining us, and would send him out of the classroom to run errands for her as though it were a special privilege. Whenever he left the room, she would read this assignment aloud to the class, make a joke about his mistakes. Then, when she heard footsteps, she'd remind us all that what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom. Of course, I whistleblow and told both Navy and my parents and the school admin. The result was no consequences for her, but I started getting sent out on errands, or my case, not actually going, and instead staying within earshot to eavesdrop. When I was gone, she would remind everyone that I took what was in the classroom to others and could not be trusted, and that no one should ever trust me. A few years later, my mom was student teaching at St. Cyril and walked past barbed wire and Ms. Mako's door to hear her telling the class not to trust another student before betraying them all by telling them that their parents what happened in class. Just an awful, evil woman. My mom abused my father while he was dying. When I confronted her about it, she just blinked and said, "Yes, I'm abusing him, but he deserves it." I'm well aware of my father's faults, but he was never abusive with her. Worked his entire life to support her, and then when his health failed and he couldn't get work anymore, she decided he was a liability. She also refused to work overtime anymore when they were 3 years away from paying off the house and just needed someone making minimum wage to make the house payment, even though we offered to get her a good-paying part-time job. They ended up losing everything. He passed, and then she did, alone. Not without a reason, but she's what most people that she's crossed would consider evil. My sister has borderline personality disorder and likely narcissistic personality disorder. She's adopted and got a diagnosis in adulthood. My sister suffered through extreme horrific child abuse in early childhood and was abandoned by her primary caregiver, which led to disorganized attachment. But when I met her, we were both dumb kids and I had no idea what was going on. I just saw someone who was socially skilled, manipulative, good and bad, and could make a ton of acquaintances within seconds of walking in the room. People just love her. She could say, "Watch this," and make the boys fall in love with her almost instantly. I was socially awkward kid in the white. Yet I had to basically walk her through the cognitive empathy. It was like she put on a performance and said the right thing or do the right thing or emote for social approval, but didn't quite understand that the other people had feelings on a matter. Social things like relationships, even friendships, and SE or sex were 100% transactionable. She has slept with her close friends' husbands over and over again and showed absolutely zero remorse. Cheated in every single relationship she's ever been in. As soon as someone new and shiny walks past, become addicted to drugs, sabotaged her birth control successfully to trap a guy, had the baby and traumatized her child, can't fathom accountability, and her life is a revolving door of acquaintances that looks good on the surface level, but are seldom seen. The thing is, it's like she cognitively is incapable of introspection. She just blue screens or gets horribly aggressive and dangerous to be on if called out on her own behavior. So she's going to stay like this, or for all of her life.